Hi, and welcome to SpondyCast, where we bring together the best medical minds, thought leaders, scientists, patients, and caregivers to inform and inspire the spondylitis community. I'm your host, Jill Miller, living my best spa life, knowing that how we meet today has the power to change everything going forward. Please note that the information provided in this podcast should not be considered medical advice. We do encourage all listeners to consult their healthcare professionals for medical concerns. Thank you for listening, and we hope you find our discussion today enlightening. Hi, and welcome to SpondyCast. Today we are talking inside the immune system, uncovering the triggers behind spondyloarthritis. Dr. Kristen Mengwasser, physician, scientist, and assistant adjunct professor of rheumatology at UCSF, and SAA's 2025 Early Career Investigator Award winner, joins us to discuss her research on how the immune system triggers axSpA. Her work explores how the HLA-B27 gene and small protein fragments may spark inflammation, offering new clues about what starts the disease. Dr. Mengwasser explains how uncovering these immune triggers could lead to more precise diagnoses, targeted treatments, and future therapies that teach the immune system to restore balance, bringing new hope to people living with spondyloarthritis. Let me tell you a bit about our guest. Dr. Kristen Mengwasser is a physician scientist and assistant adjunct professor of rheumatology at San Francisco General Hospital. She earned her MD PhD from Harvard University, completed her internal medicine residency at Brigham and Women's Hospital, and her rheumatology fellowship at UCSF. Her research focuses on understanding why autoimmune diseases begin, with a particular emphasis on spondyloarthritis, and an emphasis on applying genetic tools to improve our understanding of these conditions. Welcome to SpondyCast.
Thank you so much. Thank you for the very generous introduction, and thank you so much for inviting me to be here.
No, we're excited. And I first met you in Chicago here at ACR when you were able to receive the Jane Burkell Early Career Investigator Award, and congratulations again. Tell us a little bit about what this recognized for you particularly, and what inspired your research focus on the immune system.
Yeah, first I want to thank SAA for this award and for the tremendous support of my basic science research work. What inspired me to pursue research in axSpA is really caring for patients with this condition and getting to know them and learning from them about the questions they're curious about. I think the more faces and stories that I've connected with this condition, the more I've wondered kind of the same things that patients are wondering, which is, why does this disease occur in some people and not others? It runs in families, but not everyone develops the disease. Are there some triggers? I think these are really important questions that are not just theoretical. They're important and practical, and I think we have the tools in modern science to make real advances in understanding them. So that opportunity inspires me, and that's what led me to pursue this project.
I love it. It's the curiosity, right? You're like, I'm going to figure out how to answer these questions. Okay, so HLA-B27, this is something that many of us are familiar with, but we don't really understand what this gene does. In most of our patients are very advanced in our listeners, but I think in simple terms, what does HLA-B27 mean, and why is it such a key piece of the puzzle?
Yes, definitely. So yeah, HLA-B27 is a gene, as most of your listeners know, that increases the risk of developing axSpA. But there are two important asterisks to make on that comment. The first is that if you do inherit this gene, it doesn't necessarily mean that you will develop the disease. So it's only about maybe 5% of people who have HLA-B27 who go on to develop any symptoms of axSpA. So that's an interesting part of the puzzle. The second part is that most people with axSpA do have HLA-B27, but not everyone. So it's about 70 to 90% of people, meaning that you can develop the disease without this gene. So there are a lot of interesting subtleties to it. And in terms of what it does, it's part of the immune system. And I guess if I were to describe its role, its job is to kind of report on, what it's seeing in the body to the immune system, kind of survey things and make those reports. It's one of 12 reporters or messengers that have this function. So there's something about the messenger or the message or when the message is delivered, all of which that leads to kind of those initial events that leads to a cascade, eventually resulting in symptoms, pain, and chronic inflammation. So it's a lot of subtleties to it, but it's a very important part of the puzzle.
Do you have an infographic for that?
Oh, and info. Oh,
Wouldn't it be interesting, like a decision tree?
I'd be very happy to make one. I mean, I think, it's these are kind of key facts about the puzzle. So
Yeah,
yeah,
no, I
happy to
love
make
it.
one. Yeah.
Okay, so on top of that, though, your research more specifically gets into uh, related to HLA-B27, gets into the peptides, right?
Yes,
And
exactly.
for those of us that watch Instagram, we are obsessed with collagen peptides, uh,
Right. Yeah.
fast 38.
Yeah.
But you're looking at how certain peptides, which are protein fragments, might trigger the immune system in people with axSpA. And I don't want to confuse people with collagen because they're different protein fragments you're looking at. But I think when most of us think of peptides, we think of that. But what does it mean in context to axSpA, and why is it so important?
Yeah, great. Yeah, no, yeah, peptides are correct. Protein fragments. Collagen's an example of a protein for which there are other protein fragments. But in the case of axSpA, I guess I would say that if HLA-B27 is the messenger, the peptide is the message. It's a very short, it's actually just 9-character message, kind of more like a tweet to the immune system. It's like just 9 characters saying like, this is what I found, in your body. And, it's mostly things that are supposed to be there. But there's something about those 9 characters in axSpA that kind of sets off inflammation where it shouldn't be. So I think that the message and the content there we think is part of what causes the disease. So that's why I'm so interested in it. Um,
So when you talk about the peptides, I didn't do very well in basic science, so I'm sorry.
so let me know if I'm
So
getting too much in
peptides are
the.
proteins, but they're proteins that carry a message. Is that, am I
Yeah,
following?
I guess I'm saying that's their function in this
Yeah.
condition. Yeah, but they can have all kinds of functions. Collagen's function is to give structure to your tendons, and other proteins have other functions. But in this case, the function of this little peptide is, I would say, it's kind of like a message, um,
And who
to the
does it
immune
talk to?
the immune system.
It talks to the immune system.
Primarily part of the immune system called T cells, but the immune system's kind of an orchestra of many parts that talk to each other and everything. But the peptide is sort of like the tweet of this is
I
what
love
this is what I found today. It's not 280 characters, it's 9. But
but
even so,
still,
it's it's a small short message, to tell the immune system what's it out there in the body.
that's so cool. Okay. So you're looking at how those tweets are talking to how the tweets, whether or not the immune system is reading their tweets. Um, and I think you mentioned something really interesting about HLA-B27, right? Because HLA-B27 is the gene, and how does the protein uh, or the peptides you're looking at, how does that interact with HLA-B27?
Yeah, they sit right in a little groove. HLA-B27 is the messenger, and it has a little slot for the peptide to sit in. And so that combination of the messenger and the message is what says to the immune system, this is what we're finding in the environment. And most of the time, what you find in the body are things you shouldn't react to. They're your own tissues, your own joints. They're things that are not threatening, but there's something about axSpA that sets off a series of events that you perceive there is a threat, even when there isn't, and that leads to multiple events, eventually culminating in symptoms.
Okay. And back to HLA-B27. This is fascinating, by the way, because I'm
I mean,
learning
I
a
know, let me know
new
if I'm too, ask more,
cool.
but let me know if
This
I'm
is
too
a
much in the weeds.
conversation most of us don't have, I
Yeah.
think. Okay, so not all versions of HLA-B27 cause the disease. So only, you said about 5% of
Yeah, that's
positive.
another, there's a very interesting feature, right? So not everyone who has B27 develops the disease, something like 5%. So plenty of people have B27 and they never develop symptoms. And then within B27, there are multiple versions. So not all versions are equal. There are a handful that are, reasonably common, but some of them are associated with increasing risk of axSpA, and some of them are not. So that to me is kind of a key puzzle. They're actually very, very similar to each other. They're only just like a couple typos different.
Right.
So why do some of them have this role and increase your risk of the disease while others don't? That's one of the questions we're trying to address. It's very interesting. They're very
So
similar.
they are in an HLA is human leukocyte antigen. Is that, did I get that right?
Yeah. A plus.
I'm learning. And
Yeah.
then B27 is the classification, right?
Yes.
And then you
And
would
then there's
have,
another level.
that's
So
what,
there's,
okay, that's where I was going. Is that
yeah,
next then disease associated, disease neutral?
yes, exactly. So there's HLA, B27, then there's O4, O5, O6, O9. So there's different versions of HLA B27. And the version you have is relevant because some of them increase disease risk and some don't. So we're calling some disease associated and some disease neutral because some of those versions, like HLA-B2706, doesn't actually increase the risk of axSpA. It's so interesting because it's very similar to
Right.
HLA-B2705.
And does our current test for HLA-B27 actually look at those?
Usually not. But in some hospitals and at some places, it does tell you the suballele. So it really depends on your setting and where the test is being done. But that information is attainable, but it's not always sent.
Interesting. Okay.
Sometimes we can deduce what subversion people most likely have based on their ancestral background, because some of these versions are more common in different parts of the world than others. So, it's more common if you're of Northern European descent to have HLA-B2705 versus East Asian descent to have HLA-B2704. But we don't always test it and get that next level of information in the clinic.
Okay. And then no, this is fascinating. I never knew this. Uh, you're a researcher, so researchers always have big questions. What is the big question you are trying to answer about why the immune system mistakenly attacks the body in axSpA?
Yeah, I mean, I think that is the fundamental question of why does this happen? Is there something about the message or the messenger that sets off a series of events? What is the message? This like 9-letter tweet, and where is it coming from? Is it coming from the spine or a bacteria or some combination? We want to understand those initial events that spark the disease process, because the more we understand that, the more different ways we might be able to interrupt that signal or rewire it or dismantle it. So I want to understand that process in as much detail as possible, because the more we know, the more opportunities it can open for therapeutics, diagnostics, and other things that would make a difference to our patients.
Yeah, and I think in general, my experience and probably the experience of many patients is probably as little as 10 to 15 years ago, you might go in to be treated and not knowing what you have, and you were told like, well, this isn't a disease that trauma would trigger, or this isn't a disease that could be triggered by, and I don't know if that's part of what you're looking for. Is I think initially there was from what I remember through the diagnosis cycle, was being told, oh, well, like trauma doesn't really trigger immune diseases, or this doesn't trigger. And I think we know a lot more. And I don't know if there's been more focus on these research questions, asking what were all the things that led up to this cascade of the immune system just falling apart,
Yeah.
as I describe it, non-medically. uh, but is that sort of like some of the new genetic tools, like Episcan and T-scan systems you were talking about, helping you to uncover what that universe of things that causes your immune system to go wacky?
Yeah, we hope so. I mean, we're trying to map all those triggers. Is it, as you're saying, we don't think it's usually trauma, although sometimes overuse or damage to a joint may be part of why people have symptoms in one place, not the other. But is it something in the gut? Is it some combination of different factors? So we're using these sort of high throughput genetic tools to try to map this whole landscape and all the possible triggers that most of the time the answer is multifactorial. It could be a couple of things. It could be different from one person to another. So we want kind of that high resolution to try to understand what the multiple triggers might be for any given person.
Yeah.
Um,
What a fun job.
it is a fun job. It is a fun job. We hope we'll find some of these answers. As I know that it would make a difference. I think you mentioned these two tools. I should mention that scientific research requires a team, so it's not just myself working on this. We have a whole team of multiple scientists and clinicians all participating in this effort, with the goal of mapping the triggers and understanding them.
Okay, I'm going to ask you, this is an interesting question, I think, is that some of the findings you and I think teams you've worked with,
Yes.
uh, those findings suggest that certain peptides confuse the immune system into attacking healthy tissue. How does that lead to new treatments? And most of us know, how does understanding that lead to different or new treatments? Because, we've seen a lot of new treatments over the last 25 years, but what do you think you can unlock with some of that information?
Yeah, it's a really exciting area. It's at this point somewhat speculative. I'll give that caveat at the beginning, but I think, as we were saying, the message to the immune system, it's normally you set off a cascade of inflammation and symptoms when there's something like a foreign threat. Maybe there's a virus you come into contact with, and you want to trigger some events that help you to clear the virus, that comes along with symptoms. That's an example of the immune system not being confused. But the confusing part in axSpA is that you kind of overreact to something that's natural and normal in the body, and it creates pain and inflammation in a place where there's not an infection, there's not a problem. So those are the signals that we're looking for. Is the part of the normal part of the body that the immune system's kind of overreacting to. So if we know that, how could it lead to new treatments? The idea is, could we dismantle this signal somehow? Could we rewire it? Again, it's in kind of a theoretical phase, but maybe this could take the form of like a cellular therapy,
Mm,
maybe a vaccine. These are exciting things to think about that we don't yet have available, but maybe we could kind of teach the immune system that actually this thing in the spine that you think is a problem, actually, don't stop. It's not a problem. Try to teach the immune system, that these things that are, they're responding to or they're confused about,
yeah.
um, they should not react to, and hopefully that would help calm the inflammation, treat symptoms. Again, speculative, but I hope the field is heading this way.
Yeah. I think of it a little bit like, I don't know if you've ever looked at pain research or uh, neurotransmitter work, where they always say like neurons that fire together wire together.
I like that.
Yeah, and I think it's a real thing. Like if you can get, and I'm again not a professional, but the way I understand it is if you can get these neural pathways sort of firing differently, you can actually start to change the way your brain works. And
Yeah,
it's
there's definitely an analogy there with the immune system, that there's a kind of a critical mass of events and players and things that create an inflammatory cascade, and
Yeah.
we want
Yeah.
to kind of undo that. We want to like de-escalate that. And one way to do that perhaps is instructing the immune system about which signals are good and which signals are bad.
Yeah. Well, people with AS, we like we're systems thinkers in general. Our bodies are systems thinkers.
Yeah,
Uh,
they are.
um, so you mentioned an idea of what I'll call a peptide-based vaccine or therapy that might teach the immune system. Uh, is that a reality for patients in the future?
Gosh,
Could be a reality. Speculative.
I hope so. I wish that it could be. It's not something we have available right now, but we can imagine it, and I think we have to imagine it to be able to pursue the steps needed to eventually try to build it. But the concept would be that we take those little peptides, those little protein fragments sitting in the HLA-B27 pocket, and we kind of package them in such a way that we let the immune system know these things are not a threat. So these are good messages, not bad messages. And try to rewire that circuitry, try to reverse the process. And it would, I could envision it as being a series of subcutaneous injections, for example. I wish we had it available, and we're working on it. That's why we're pursuing it, but
Yeah.
not yet, unfortunately.
And when you talk about I'm going to go in the weeds here for a second. Like in terms of proteins, is there good evidence that what we eat converts into our matter, if you will?
Yeah.
Is there good evidence that what we eat is changing the way those peptides are expressed? I don't know if I'm using the right language,
No,
but
no, no, yeah, it's like actually a very common question. Just people want to know, is there anything that I can eat that can modulate my symptoms? And we unfortunately don't have great evidence for direct effects of specific foods getting taken up by the body and presented by HLA-B27. So there are a few steps in between that, but I mean, we do think it can affect the microbiome, and therefore some of the signals that come from the microbiome by B27, some of those tweets to the immune system, can be affected indirectly. So it definitely has an effect, but there's not a direct thing necessarily you could ingest that would really change the messages that are being sent throughout the
okay.
body.
I
But
was hoping.
it's a great question. No, people ask
Yeah.
me that question all the time.
Yeah,
It's a
no,
really
it's a good,
yeah.
it's something that I think about a lot. And I think we probably just haven't done the research on some of I mean, you're deep, 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 deep in the weeds.
Yes.
I'm thinking even like very basic research on diet and how people feel. We
Yeah.
don't even have a lot of that for
No,
X.
I agree. Yeah, like on multiple levels, we're missing
Yeah.
some of that information. But
Yeah.
I'm interested in the deep, deep, deep weed level, but also
Yeah.
in
No,
the top
yeah.
level, because if there's something people who change in their diet that would improve their symptoms, they'd be very interested
Yeah.
in that. So
So one of my daughters and I were recently talking about if we could start a drinking game related to how often rheumatologists tell people to take their fish oil and vitamin D.
yeah, like yeah.
Like
Uh,
if we could track that via a drinking game on outcomes, that might have a negative effect on outcomes, but uh,
it's
okay.
it comes up, but no, I mean it's because we wish we had more things that we could offer in that sphere.
Yeah. And do you see that some of this work that you're going to do or that you are doing, that it becomes more of a like I mean, you've diagnosed and then you can monitor through blood tests and continue to monitor maybe through some additional therapies like you talked about, and then continuing to monitor outcomes and improvement? Or do you think you guys may lead toward like besides vaccine, like different therapies that can be used?
Yeah, I think these are all such exciting directions. I think this specific project is aimed more towards therapeutics, but we are also working, like many other groups, on trying to find more biomarkers for this condition. I think, we all recognize that there is a delay to diagnosis that is still so lengthy for our patients. And from the time people initially develop symptoms to the time they really get a diagnosis to then the further time they get on a therapy that's really working for them can be
Yeah.
years. It can be 5 or 10 years even. So if we had additional blood tests that could inform us of whether people have this condition earlier, we could start to close that time gap. And in that time, not only are people obviously suffering, it's going through pain, but it can cause irreversible change to damage to joints, as I know all of your listeners already know from personal experience. So we are working and using different, again, these sort of genetic high throughput screening platforms to look for more biomarkers. And I think, if we had multiple, if we had earlier ones, that would all be very helpful in the care of axSpA patients.
Yeah. And so you're focused on peptides. What other research out there excites you today?
Yeah, I guess I was alluding to a direction that's is different from peptides. It's another part of the immune system. Again, they're all part of the same orchestra, and they're all coordinating, to produce the outcomes that people feel. But um, the other part of the equation is the B cell part of the immune system, which produces antibodies. Like, those help you clear infections. They have a lot of very important roles, but people haven't really found antibodies that are good biomarkers for axSpA, with the exception of, I know it's been previously discussed on this podcast, of 1433 ETA, which is very exciting.
Yep.
More like that. There may be different ones in different types of patients, different ones in people with different versions of HLA-B27. So if we had more of those kind of antibody-based biomarkers, I think it would be very, very, very impactful. So that excites me because of the potential impact.
Yeah. And like in that vein, now I'm deep, deep in the weeds. In that vein, what
Welcome.
do you, yeah, right. No, I mean, like, I love this stuff.
Here we
As you
are. Yeah.
know. What do you think, like, what do you think this population of patients, what do you think is the biggest unmet need out there?
Ooh, the biggest one is,
Okay, top three.
let me name a top three, and then we can think about which one we think is the
Okay.
biggest. But I think delayed diagnosis is a huge one.
Yeah.
I think our current lack of ability to predict which treatment is best for which person, so that, being able to predict based on diagnostics which of our many therapeutics is best, and then therefore there's a little, some trial and error involved in finding the best treatment for people. I'd say that's a big one. um, and then I guess I'd say the third, again, it's a personal opinion, but is maybe lack of different types of treatment. We're talking today in a speculative way, but maybe in the future we'll have cellular therapy, we'll have vaccine, we'll have different types of treatment. So coming at the problem from a different angle. Okay, those are the first three that come to mind. Which is the biggest is they're all big, so it's hard to say.
Yeah, no, they're big. And I'm thinking about it in terms of, and we talk about this a lot, like among the SAA community. And I think the delay is huge, right?
Yeah,
I often said, like, I want on my gravestone it to be like, this girl made a contribution to reducing delay to diagnosis.
I know.
That's
It's huge.
uh and the predictive analytics piece of of what will work is enormous, because I think that also falls into, so you've got delay to diagnosis, then you've got, I would call it predictive analytics around what
Yeah,
works well, where do you bring in holistic and lifestyle medicine versus what's the impact of the treatment that's medical, and then more treatments.
right. Well, yes. Problems one and two are huge ones. I guess three is we always wish we had more tools. So, but they're all big.
No, that's huge. And do you think the biggest lever for all of them is research?
I personally, yes, but of course there are many axes and levers that can help the
Yeah.
entire community, move all of these areas forward. So again, it's the biggest or like multiple big things, but yeah,
Yeah.
the type of community in SAA, the like sharing of ideas, the identification of the problem is very big, is maybe almost as big as trying to find the solution to the problem, or
Yeah.
different ways of looking for the solution. So I'd say it's all, yeah, top three: identifying the problem, choosing the right tool, and executing the study, and
Oh, I love
bringing
that.
that knowledge back to patients.
Yeah. And then we just have to figure out how to spell axial spondyloarthritis.
Oh yeah, and then right, and then
Number four.
make sure we change the name and make sure it's long. Right, yeah, I know.
That could be it.
I know, yeah.
No, that's super interesting. I love your perspective there.
Thank you.
Um, okay, so what's the most exciting thing you think is coming up in all of this? And then I'm gonna let you land the plane, and
No,
we'll
no
do
worries. Yeah. No, what I mean, the next exciting things, it's an exciting time for this field, I think, because we are starting to get some traction on all of those categories that we just mentioned as biggest need. There was a group effort in 2022. I'm sure many of your listeners may be familiar with, from Chris Garcia, Wayne Yokoyama, Michael Paley. Many investigators contributed to an effort to try to find some of these peptides. And finding even a handful of them is exciting, because it could lead to kind of new options, like a maybe a cellular therapy in the future. I think that opening these doors is exciting. Again, what's the biggest and most exciting direction? I definitely think that's one. I hope it will exist in the future. The cellular therapy is beginning to be used in limited settings in other autoimmune diseases.
So
And the,
are you saying like cellular, like stem cell type
Kind
therapies?
of. I would envision it as being different for axSpA patients. Again, completely
Yeah.
speculating, but a version that may exist in the future for rheumatoid arthritis is taking cells from the patient, your own cells, um, regular cells in your blood, not a stem cell, modifying them kind of to send a message back to the immune system, and then giving the cells back to the patient. So it's kind of like an appointment where you go, and your cells will be collected. We reprogram them in the lab, and then we give them back to you. So there's not a lot of foreign elements introduced, but basically try to reteach the immune system, rewire, and kind of reset those signals. Again, it's a vision, it's a dream of what might exist, but I guess it excites me because it's something that hasn't been tried. And in the other conditions, other autoimmune diseases, including rheumatoid arthritis, lupus, myositis, where it's been tried in very limited, small, carefully selected patient cohorts, it seems very promising. And the idea is, what we all want is therapy that lasts longer with fewer side effects. You know, and in these limited settings, again with caveats, it seems to be the case from cellular therapy. So it might be an option in the future. I hope at least we'll explore it as a community.
I love that idea. I love the way you said it, though. You said all we really want is therapies that last longer with fewer side effects.
Yeah, and that might have to be a new category of treatment. Um,
Great,
and
let's do it.
we have to at least yeah, we have, no, and there are a lot of, obviously, like a lot of steps between imagining such a thing and creating it, and proving that it's safe, and doing the due diligence in smaller settings to make sure that it's, and choosing the right people to receive that. But there's so many things, but I think we have to imagine these kind of things for them to eventually become a reality. So I hope for the right people, maybe something like this might exist in the future.
Yeah, I mean, we've got to have that kind of, call it like blue sky thinking around how do we find the solution. So I super appreciate people like you that uh, don't just have the ideas, but actually go out and do the research, because this girl, I usually just go, well, like, wouldn't it be great if we could do this? So thank you for sitting in the hot seat today. Uh,
Oh, okay.
and I love your passion around how we get to solutions for this, and it's so fun to talk to you all the time. Uh, yeah, and I hope you'll come back and talk to us again when you've completed some of these studies, and have updates. But yeah, thank you for joining us. Did I miss anything that we need to talk about?
Um, no, I don't think so, but I want to say it's such a pleasure to get to know this community. I'm really inspired to see the way that patients, providers, researchers, everyone comes together within SAA to kind of work on all those steps. What I get identifying the problem is, like as I said, just as important as the follow through. So
Yeah.
we're here on the other end working on it. We hear you. And I guess the last thing I wanted to mention is kind of just all the people who are supporting this project, because it's a team effort. I think the more we share about this condition and you know learn, spread awareness amongst different groups, especially researchers. Researchers are very eager to help. So I
Yeah.
think, just sort of being a voice for people with axSpA to the research community and saying this, we have a delay to diagnosis. That's a really big problem. Researchers are ready to roll up their sleeves and work on the problem, so it's, I've connected with a lot of folks. So Dr. Peter Bruno is an assistant professor at UCSF who developed EpiScan in the lab of Steve Elledge at Harvard. And his technology is an engine that's powering this research forward. He's a primary supporter of this work. So I wanted to make sure I said thank you to
Yeah.
him. Leanne Gensler is my clinical mentor on this topic. Alex Marson is my primary scientific mentor. There are, several people in the lab working on, various aspects of the project. So I wanted to be sure that I highlight, on our end, we have a whole community that's now invested in this and excited to work on some of these questions to try to contribute. And the more we make these connections, I think the more this kind of work can exist in the future.
Oh, I agree. When you bring a group of minds together and everybody can kind of translate, not just the researchers, but the docs and the patients, uh, and you can start to translate all of it, it becomes super like incredibly powerful. I think it's how we shift the future.
It's exciting for me, and I think it's definitely coming to be in this project because of all the people involved in it. So, and because of the support from SAA, which has made such a big difference. So I'm really appreciative. And again, I hope you all get to meet each other. I always go back
Yeah.
to the lab and I say, it's just like, there's a need, and people are excited that we're studying this, and we need to keep, moving forward. So we're working on it.
Yeah, no, we love it. Well, and I've met a few of them. So,
Yeah,
uh,
yeah, yeah. I mean, in my little neighborhood. Yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah, but we have to keep going. And I like that we're building. And I think just to land the plane where we started, and probably in the last few episodes, I've just been really like harping on the research dollars and why it's so important, uh, for us to be able to distribute research dollars, because that it takes time to commercialize those and turn things into products, and whether it's technology or treatments or pharmaceuticals or lifestyle, whatever it is, it takes dollars to get that done. And the incredible opportunity for me personally that like I never gave much stock to until being someone who got to look at some of the proposals and help to catalyze or like spark new careers or people researching this, is like probably one of the greatest, like tiny little, like it's, I do a tiny little thing compared to what you guys do. And it's just like such a pleasure to be able to watch these things unfold over time. And takes a village though, right?
It definitely it takes a whole team, but I really agree, and the funding for this kind of like deep in the weeds, like root of the problem research is, I think, is very important. Is it's understanding the root of the problem and can open doors in treatment and diagnosis. It's not always a fast answer, and it's usually a complicated answer. But if we advance our understanding at the root, or at the triggers, or at the events that spark the whole process, I think that can open new avenues for therapy. So
Yeah.
that's what excites me, and it means so much to us in terms of the funding and the support from the foundation. It makes a big difference. I hope we'll find some of these answers and be able to bring them back to people managing this condition, living with it, and
Yeah, I hope so too.
advance our field.
Amazing. Well, thank you for joining us, and yeah, do come back.
My pleasure. I would love to. It's always great to see you too.
SpondyCast was made possible by donations from the Spondylitis Association of America's individual members and our show's corporate sponsor, AbbVie. Since our founding in 1983, the Spondylitis Association of America has been the face, voice, and leading nationwide nonprofit educating, empowering, and advocating for people living with spondyloarthritis. Through our extensive work with patients, the medical community, and partners, we provide information and resources to help people impacted by the disease live better lives and champion research to find a cure.